King Rajan ruled over a vast and prosperous kingdom, where wealth flowed like an unending river, feeding his ever-expanding empire. Gold piled high in his treasury, jewels glistened in the torch's glow, and merchants from distant lands came, bearing gifts eager to win his favor. His palace, a fortress of opulence, stood as a monument to his conquests, its walls lined with precious stones, its ceilings painted with scenes of his victories. Servants attended to his every desire, generals awaited his commands, and nobles bowed at his feet. He had everything: power, riches, absolute control over all who lived within his domain. And yet, beneath the weight of his crown, he felt nothing but emptiness. Each triumph, each new land seized in his name should have satisfied him. Each pile of gold stacked upon another should have brought him peace. But with every conquest, the hunger inside him only grew. It was as if his soul was an empty vessel, and no matter how much he poured into it, it was never full. He told himself that the next victory, the next kingdom, the next chest of treasure would finally silence the gnawing void within him. But the more he took, the less fulfilled he felt. Why? Why was it never enough? One night, the weight of his restlessness followed him into sleep. In his dream, he found himself sitting atop a mountain of gold, gazing down upon the world he had conquered. His throne was built of jewels, his crown heavier than ever, his hands overflowing with wealth. He had reached the pinnacle of power, and yet he wanted more. He reached down, scooping up handfuls of treasure, feeling the cool, solid weight of his success in his grasp. But then something strange happened. The moment he closed his fingers around the riches, they crumbled into dust. He gasped and tried again, grabbing, clenching, holding tighter, but the harder he held on, the faster they slipped through his hands. Gold turned to sand, slipping through his fingers, carried away by an unseen wind. And then a voice echoed through the vast emptiness, low, deep, and familiar. How much more do you need, Rajan, before you realize you will never have enough? The word sent a chill through him. He turned, searching for the speaker, but saw nothing, only darkness. Only the unbearable truth settling into his chest. He awoke with a start, his breath ragged, his body damp with sweat. His heart pounded as though he had just fought a battle. But against what? Against himself? Against the truth? The dream haunted him. It followed him through the grand halls of his palace, its golden walls suddenly feeling smaller, suffocating. It whispered to him in the silence of his throne room, where even the weight of his crown felt heavier than before. It echoed in his mind as he sat before a feast fit for 100 men, yet found himself unable to eat. That morning, as he sat in his royal chamber, staring blankly at the treasures surrounding him, a messenger entered, bowing deeply. "Your Majesty," he said hesitantly, "a strange old man stands outside the palace gates. He claims to know the secret to happiness." Rajan scoffed. A beggar offering wisdom to a king. The thought was ridiculous. What could a man with nothing possibly teach a man who had everything? And yet something inside him stirred, a whisper of doubt, a flicker of curiosity, or perhaps something deeper, a fear he dared not name. What if, despite all his power, all his victories, all his riches, he was the one who truly had nothing? For the first time in his life, King Rajan chose to listen. The morning air was crisp, the scent of damp earth and pine filling King Rajan's lungs as he rode through the dense forest. The rhythmic pounding of horse hooves against the ground should have brought him a sense of exhilaration. But today, he felt nothing but an uneasy emptiness. His hunting party followed close behind, archers at the ready, hounds sniffing eagerly at the earth, servants waiting in silence for their king's next command. But Rajan barely noticed them. His mind was elsewhere, lost in the remnants of a dream that had refused to fade with the morning light. They had been tracking a stag, a magnificent beast with antlers like the branches of an ancient tree. It was the kind of prey worthy of a king, swift and strong, the perfect prize for a morning hunt. Rajan had followed it for miles, his instincts sharpened, his pulse steady as he raised his bow. Victory was mere moments away. But then something unexpected happened. The stag, instead of fleeing, stopped. It turned its head toward him. Its dark eyes locked onto his, calm and unafraid. It was not the look of a hunted creature. It was something else entirely, a knowing gaze, as if it saw something in him that he himself could not. For reasons he could not explain, Rajan hesitated. His grip on the bough loosened. In that fleeting moment of doubt, the stag bolted, disappearing, into the thick of the trees. He exhaled sharply, lowering his weapon. A strange weight settled in his chest, an unease that had nothing to do with the hunt. His men stirred behind him, waiting for his order to pursue. Instead, Rajan dismounted, ignoring their puzzled expressions. "Leave it," he commanded. "The hunt is over." He walked away from his party, letting his feet carry him toward the sound of running water. There was something calling to him, a pull deep within his chest, quiet yet insistent. He followed it, weaving through towering trees until he stepped into a clearing. Before him a stream wound lazily through the landscape, its waters glistening under the morning sun. The gentle murmur of the current filled the air, soothing yet ceaseless, as if whispering a secret only those who listened could hear. And there, sitting on a smooth rock by the bank, was an old man. His clothes were tattered, his sandals worn. Thin, his silver hair, long and unkempt, cascaded over his shoulders. He had nothing, no gold, no fine robes, no jewels adorning his hands, and yet the serenity on his face was unlike anything Rajan had ever seen. The king frowned. He had seen many beggars in his kingdom, men with empty hands and hollow eyes. But this old man was different. There was no hunger in his gaze, no desperation in his posture. He sat as though the whole world belonged to him, as if he lacked nothing. The absurdity of it made Rajan step forward. "Old man," he said, his voice carrying the weight of his authority, "you sit here with nothing. No land, no wealth, no power, and yet you look content. How can a man who owns nothing be so at peace?" The old man did not answer immediately. Instead, he simply looked up, his weathered face crinkling into something between amusement and understanding. Then, slowly, he extended a hand toward the stream beside him. "Tell me, Your Majesty," he said, his voice calm and steady. "Do you see the water?" Rajan's frown deepened. "Of course. And do you see how it flows? It does not hold on to the past, nor does it chase the future. It simply moves, taking only what is needed, giving where it must." The old man dipped his fingers into the water, lifting a handful before letting the droplets trickle back into the stream. "It holds on to nothing, yet it is never empty." Rajan said nothing, watching as the current twisted and turned around rocks and fallen leaves, never still, yet never lost. "You, Your Majesty, are like a man who tries to own the river," the old man continued. "You grasp at power and wealth, believing they will fill you. But like water slipping through clenched fists, the more you hold on, the more you lose." The king's hands instinctively curled into fists. He should have been insulted. Who was this man to lecture him? But instead of anger, something else flickered within him, a quiet, unsettling recognition. His entire life had been spent chasing, conquering, clutching tightly to everything he believed would bring him happiness. And yet, the tighter he held on, the emptier he felt. Still, pride was not so easily cast aside. Rajan turned away from the stream, shaking his head. A king must hold on to what he has, or he will lose everything. The old man smiled as though he had heard these words many times before. "Perhaps, Your Majesty," he said gently, "it is in letting go that one gains the most." Rajan did not respond. He simply walked away, leaving the old man by the stream, his words following him like a whisper in the wind. That night, as the king lay in his grand chamber beneath a ceiling so high it could not be touched, surrounded by golden walls that gleamed even in the dim light, he did not feel at home. He had spent his life building his kingdom, expanding his empire, collecting treasures beyond imagination. Yet, in the quiet of his palace, where there was no battle to fight, no land to seize, no feast to distract him, he felt more like a prisoner than a king. The words of the old man would not leave him. He had spent his life believing that ownership was the key to happiness. that to possess more was to be more. But what if that had been a lie? What if, despite all he had gained, he was no different than a man trying to catch the wind? For the first time in his life, King Rajan felt something unfamiliar. Not the hunger for more, not the thirst for power. He felt doubt. King Rajan returned to his palace, but something was different. The towering walls that had once given him a sense of security now felt suffocating, pressing in on him like an invisible force. The gold that adorned every column, every ceiling, every doorway now gleamed too brightly, its luster almost mocking. He had lived his life believing that power was freedom, that the more he possessed, the stronger he became. But now for the first time he felt trapped, not by enemies, not by war, but by his own kingdom, by the weight of all he had built. He should have felt triumphant. His empire was vast, his people obedient, his treasury overflowing. But as he walked through the grand halls of his palace, past marble statues of his ancestors and portraits of himself in victory, he could not escape the words of the old man by the stream. "You are like a man who tries to own the river. The more you hold on, the more you lose." The feeling of unease followed him everywhere, at his feasts where food was prepared in excess, yet tasted like nothing. In the throne room where advisers spoke of more lands to conquer, yet their words rang hollow in his ears. In his private chambers where he sat alone, surrounded by treasures that no longer brought him comfort. Then the sickness came. It started in the villages, whispers of fever, and breathlessness spreading like wildfire. The afflicted collapsed in the streets, their skin burning, their bodies wasting away. Rajan sent his finest healers, his most skilled physicians. He ordered herbs from distant lands, offered gold in exchange for a cure. But the disease did not care for wealth, nor did it bow before power. It moved through his kingdom without mercy, sparing neither the poor nor the privileged. He doubled the efforts, emptied the royal treasury to bring in more healers, ordered the temples to pray, demanded that something be done. Yet despite all his riches, despite all the control he had over his empire, he found himself powerless against something he could not see, could not command, could not bend to his will. Then, one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of fire, a messenger came running through the palace gates. His face was pale, his breath ragged. He knelt before the king, trembling. "Your Majesty," he choked, the prince has fallen ill." The world shifted beneath Rajan's feet. He did not remember how he reached the royal chambers, how the corridors blurred past him as he ran. But when he arrived, when he pushed open the heavy doors and saw his son, his only child, lying motionless upon the silk-draped bed, a terrible stillness settled over him. The boy, once full of laughter and fire, now looked impossibly small beneath the weight of his own weakness. His face was pale, his breath shallow. His hands, once strong enough to pull back the string of a bow to grasp his father's fingers, now lay limp at his sides. "Bring the healers," Rajan commanded, his voice sharp, desperate. "Bring them now." The finest physicians in the kingdom were summoned. They brought potions made from the rarest herbs, concoctions crafted from centuries-old wisdom. They promised they could save him, and Rajan believed them. He had to believe them. He had spent his entire life controlling the outcome of every battle, every decision, every moment. How could this be any different? Yet day by day, the boy grew weaker. The potions did nothing. The prayers went unanswered. The finest healers in the land lowered their heads in defeat. One evening, as Rajan sat by his son's bedside, watching the flickering candlelight cast shadows on the walls, the boy's eyes fluttered open. "Father," he whispered. Rajan grasped his son's hand. "I'm here, my son. You will be well again. I promise you." The boy smiled, a faint, fragile thing. "You always make promises, Father, that no army could ever break our walls, that no storm could ever touch our home, that we would always have more than enough." His fingers curled weakly around his father's. "But can you promise me that you will be happy?" Rajan's breath caught. "You will live and I will be happy." The boy looked at him for a long moment, something old and knowing in his gaze, a look that reminded Rajan of the stag in the forest. Then, with a sigh, his grip loosened, and the light left his eyes. Rajan did not move, did not breathe. His son, his heir, his blood, gone. For the first time in his life, King Rajan felt the true weight of power. It was not the weight of crowns or kingdoms, but the crushing realization that all of it, the gold, the palaces, the lands, the armies, had meant nothing. He could command nations to bow before him, but he could not stop time. He could buy entire cities, but he could not buy another moment with his son. He had spent his life trying to hold on to everything, but this was something he could never hold. That night, as the kingdom mourned the prince, Rajan stood alone in the grand hall of his palace, staring at his reflection in the polished marble floor. The luster of the gold around him now felt cold. The very walls he had built to protect himself now felt like the bars of a cage. His life had been spent chasing power, believing that by taking more, he would be invincible. But now he saw the truth. He was not the master of his kingdom. He was its prisoner. He thought of the old man by the stream, of the water that never held onto anything yet was never empty. He thought of how he had clenched his fists around everything he had built, only to watch it slip through his fingers like sand. A sound escaped his lips, a broken laugh, bitter and hollow. "I have spent my life conquering the world," he murmured, to the empty hall. "Yet I could not even save my own son." No answer came, only silence, only the weight of a truth he could no longer ignore. King Rajan had everything, and yet, in the end, he had nothing at all. The weight of grief clung to King Rajan like a heavy cloak, suffocating him even in the grandest halls of his palace. The world had not stopped for his suffering. His advisers still spoke of treaties and trade. His servants still set lavish feasts before him. His people still looked to him as their ruler. But everything felt different now. His son was gone, and with that loss, something inside him had shattered. Days turned into weeks, and Rajan withdrew from courtly affairs. He no longer cared for wealth, no longer found meaning in the endless conquests and ceremonies that once defined his life. He spent long hours wandering the palace, walking through rooms filled with treasures that now felt like meaningless trinkets. He passed by the golden statues of past kings and wondered if their lives had been any different. Had they too believed they could hold on to their power forever? Had they too realized too late that nothing could truly be possessed? One morning, before the sun had fully risen, Rajan made a decision. He donned a simple robe, left behind his crown, and rode alone toward the forest. His guards called after him, but he did not answer. He did not need protection. He was not going to war. He was searching for something else. The journey felt different this time. The last time he had entered the woods, he had been a king, a man, who believed in control, in ownership, in shaping the world to his will. Now he rode not as a ruler, but as a man who had lost everything and did not know what to do with the emptiness left behind. He followed the familiar path to the stream, where he had once encountered the old man. The water still flowed clear and steady, untouched by the chaos of the world beyond the trees, and there, just as before, sat the old man on his rock. He looked no different than the day Rajan had first met him, as if time had no hold on him. As if he had always been here, waiting, Rajan dismounted, stepping forward until his shadow fell over the old man. "I have returned," he said, his voice quieter than he had intended. The old man glanced up, his eyes studying Rajan's face. There was no surprise in his expression, only quiet understanding. "I know," he said simply. Rajan hesitated, then lowered himself to sit beside the old man, just as he had once sat beside his son. He had no pride left to protect, no need to pretend. "I thought I was powerful," he admitted. "I thought if I conquered enough, if I controlled enough, I could shape the world to my will." He exhaled, shaking his head. "But I couldn't even save my own child." The old man was silent for a long moment. Then he reached beside him and picked up a simple clay cup. He turned it in his hands, his fingers tracing its surface. "This cup," he said, "will break one day. That is certain. Perhaps tomorrow, perhaps years from now, but knowing that, Does it make the cup any less useful, any less beautiful? Rajan stared at the cup, his mind struggling to grasp the meaning behind the words. The old man continued, "If you understand from the beginning that this cup will not last forever, you do not cling to it. Instead, you use it while you can, appreciate it while it is whole, knowing that when it breaks, it is not a tragedy. It is simply the nature of things." Something in Rajan's chest tightened. He did not know why, but his throat burned, and for the first time in years tears filled his eyes. He had spent his entire life clutching at power, wealth, even the people he loved, believing that if he held on tightly enough, he could keep them forever. But life did not work that way. Everything changed, everything passed, everything eventually slipped away. He closed his eyes and saw his son's face, not in sickness, not in death, but the way he had been before, laughing in the gardens, running through the palace halls with wild, youthful energy. Rajan had been so consumed with securing his son's future, with ensuring that he would inherit a kingdom greater than any before it, that he had forgotten to simply cherish the time he had been given with him. The old man gently set the cup down. "Your Majesty, the pain you feel is real, but suffering comes from trying to hold on to what was never meant to be kept." He gestured toward the flowing stream. "You see the water? It does not resist change. It does not try to hold on. And yet, it is always full." Rajan gazed at the stream, watching as it moved effortlessly around rocks and fallen leaves, always in motion, never stagnant. The words sank deep into him, settling in the spaces left empty by loss. For the first time he understood. He did not return to the palace that night. He stayed in the forest, sitting beneath a great banyan tree, listening to the sounds of the world as if for the first time. He heard the rustling of the leaves, the distant hoot of an owl, the soft rhythm of the stream. Everything was alive, everything was moving. And for the first time in his life, he felt no need to control any of it. Days passed before he finally returned to his kingdom. But the man who rode back through the palace gates was not the same man who had left. He still wore the crown, still ruled the land, but he no longer sought to hold it with an iron grip. He no longer saw his kingdom as something to be owned, but something to be nurtured. He began to rule differently. He gave freely, ensuring that his people had enough, rather than hoarding wealth for himself. He spoke to his advisors, not of expansion, but of balance. He spent time among his people, among his soldiers, not as a king demanding obedience, but as a man learning to appreciate the fleeting moments life had to offer. And on some mornings, before the sun had risen, he would walk to the gardens and sit beneath the great banyan tree. He would close his eyes and listen, to the wind, to the birds, to the world moving as it always had. One day, as he sat beneath the tree, a single golden leaf detached from the branch above, drifting downward in slow, graceful spirals. Rajan watched as it landed softly in the grass, then was carried away by the breeze. He did not reach out to catch it. He did not mourn its fall. He simply smiled, watching as it became part of the world once more. The years passed gently, like the changing of the seasons. The once mighty King Rajan, who had spent his youth conquering lands and hoarding treasures, had become an old man. His hair had turned silver, his hands no longer carried the weight of a sword, and his once commanding voice had softened into something calmer, more reflective. But in his eyes there was a peace that had never existed before. One morning, as the sun cast golden light over the palace gardens, Rajan gathered his council and announced his decision. He would step down. He would pass the throne to his son-in-law, a wise and compassionate ruler, and for the first time in his life he would walk away, not as a king clinging to power, but as a man embracing freedom. His advisors were shocked. "Your Majesty, the kingdom still needs you," they pleaded. But Rajan only smiled. "A kingdom does not belong to a man," he said. "It belongs to time, and time will carry it forward with or without me." And so, with no regrets, he placed the crown upon another's head, feeling no loss, no fear, only lightness, as if a great burden had been lifted. For the first time in decades, he left the palace walls not as a ruler, but as a simple man. He chose a quiet home in the countryside, where the air smelled of earth and rain, where he could hear the wind whisper through the trees. He spent his days walking through fields, watching the river flow, listening to birdsong at dawn. He sat beneath the shade of the great banyan tree, where he had once discovered the wisdom of letting go, and watched life unfold around him. He no longer counted his riches in gold, but in moments, the laughter of children playing in the village, the warmth of the morning sun on his skin, the feeling of bare feet touching the grass. He had once believed that power was the greatest achievement a man could have, but now he understood that true wealth was found in simplicity, in presence, in being at peace with life as it was. One evening, as the sky burned with the colors of the setting sun, Rajan sat beside the familiar stream where long ago an old man had shown him the nature of water. The current was the same, steady, flowing, never holding on to anything, yet always full. He watched as a single golden leaf detached from the branch above, drifting through the air, spiraling downward. A soft smile crossed his lips. He lay back against the tree, feeling the coolness of the earth beneath him. He took a slow, deep breath as if drawing in the entire world, and as he exhaled, a quiet peace settled into his chest. He had spent his life searching for something, more land, more wealth, more control, never realizing that the thing he truly longed for was not to possess but to be free. As his eyes fluttered closed, he whispered his final words, his voice barely more than a breath. "I have found what I was looking for all along. Freedom within." The leaf touched the surface of the water, rippling gently before being carried away by the current. The river did not cling to it, nor did it resist its movement. It simply accepted, carried, and released. And with that, Rajan let go. The story of King Rajan is not just the story of a ruler, but of all of us. How often do we chase after things, success, status, possessions, believing that they will bring us happiness, only to find that the more we grasp, the more we lose. We hold on so tightly, fearing change, fearing loss, but in doing so, we become trapped in our own golden cages. But when we learn to let go, to trust the flow of life, we do not lose. We gain something greater. We gain peace. We gain freedom. We gain the ability to live fully without fear. So ask yourself, what are you holding on to that is holding you back? What would happen if you let it go? If this story touched you, if it made you reflect, take a moment to share your thoughts. Leave a comment, subscribe, and support the journey of wisdom and self-discovery. And remember, happiness is not in what we hold, but in how we live.